Okay, so hello everybody. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for coming. What I want to do is I want to look at two things. I want to look at something from the parsha, and hopefully from the parsha we'll move into the Megillah. Just as a pre-word to the words, we need to understand the Rambam says at the end of Hilchos Megillah that everything, we've got 24 books of Tanakh, right? We know that. All of the books of Tanakh are going to disappear when Mashiach comes, with the exception of Megillah and the Chamisha Chumsha Torah. So that's the case. You have to ask yourself, you have to think, what on earth is the Rambam telling us? Because the precursor to that idea of the Rambam must be that in the same way as there are eternal lessons that we learn in the Chumash, otherwise it would just be a history book, which it isn't, because if it is a history book, it's a bit useless. Okay, so in the same way that the eternal lessons, there must be eternal lessons sitting in the Megillah, and the eternal lessons of the Megillah can't simply be, right? That there was Esther and Mordechai, and Hashem is hidden, and then He reveals Himself even in hidden places. Wonderful, beautiful, because that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that it's in a way, it's a very deep idea, but it's also a very shallow idea. You teach that and we think about that and we tell our children that, but there must be many more themes that are running through the Megillah that are important for us in our lives. Because otherwise, you could have said that Megillah in one little story, one paragraph, but there must be sitting in all the different stories something important for our lives. So let's see if we can connect the things together. And if we can, great. And if we can't, we'll find something else to talk about. Okay, so let's go. Pekudei. What I'd like you to do, there are chumashim. You all got chumashim there in front of you. What I'd like you to do is to open it up onto the end, well, towards the end. So it's Perek Men of Shemot. The Perek Men of Shemot is all about the final Hakamas HaMishkan, the final establishment of the Mishkan. Okay, if we look at that carefully, we'll see the Torah says the following, that at the beginning of Perek Men, V'adiber Adonai Moshe le'emor, v'yom ha'chodesh harishon be'echad ha'chodesh takimes ha'mishkan oel moed. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to Moshe and he says to him, v'yom ha'chodesh harishon be'echad ha'chodesh, on the first day of the first month. What month is that? Nisan. What? Takim es ha'mishkan oel moed. You must put up the Mishkan, which is the Ohel Moed. Now, by the way, that sentence is so loaded in such a massive way. Why is that? Because the Ohel Moed, which we spoke about a couple of weeks ago in the parsha, it's not clear what that is. The Mishkan becomes the Ohel Moed, but initially when it speaks about the Ohel Moed, it could have just been Moshe's oil. It's not sure. It's not clear. The Mefarshim discussed that. But now it's clear the Mishkan takes over as the only space of the Ohel Moed. What does Ohel Moed mean? The concept of Moed, we have Moadim. It's the same word. So what does it mean? What does it mean to you? So what's the Ohel Moed? So it's not about that is one idea of the concept of Eidut. It's the testimony to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But wasn't the Ohel Moed? It was the Eidut of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's existence and his presence in the world, perhaps, but it also comes to the word Vad. Vad is a meeting place. A Vad is a coming together of people, of like-minded people to hear like-minded things. So that's part of the Ohel Moed. It's both things. It serves as a testimony to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and also serves as a tent of meeting. So you'll see in the English translations, in different places, some will call it a tent of meeting, and some will call it the tent of testimony. It's like fascinating. All depends. In the Old English, it was tent of testimony, not tent of meeting. Just by the way. Okay, so here it is the tent of meeting. But what's important there is that word takim et mishkan oel moed, that you will establish it, you'll erect it, you'll put it up, and then it goes through the whole story. What he needs to do, and you can read the English. I don't want to go into it. Just says all the order, what things have to be done, and that for our purposes right now is not what I want to look at. What I do want you to look at is I want you to go to Pasuk Yud Zayin. That's verse number 17. And in Pasuk Yud Zayin, the Torah says, "Vayi b'chodesh harishon b'shana shenis be'echad lachodesh hukam hamishkan." The Mishkan was established. And then it says, "Vayake Moshe es hamishkan." Moshe established the Mishkan. Now, the minute you look at that, you'll see HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Takim es hamishkan." You must establish the Mishkan. Then it says, it was established. And then it says, "Vayake Moshe es hamishkan." That Moshe then established the Mishkan. So there's somewhere there in that order, there's something wrong. It should have said, "Takim," that what? And then it should have said, "Vayake Moshe," and then it should have said, "Hukam Mishkan." But the fact that those psukim are in a strange order makes the Midrash ask a question. Now, we all learn Midrash, right? Where do we learn Midrash? Most of the place we learn Midrash from is when we're teaching our children from the little Midrash says. So you have to be careful. Because Midrash is not just a thing. Midrash doesn't exist because, Chazal had to find a story. Midrash is there because there are psukim that don't make sense. Here, the order doesn't make sense. So since the order doesn't make sense, therefore, Chazal sought to find a little bit of sense. And the Midrash Tanchuma says the following. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says, Kol shivas yemei ha-miluim haya Moshe mefarkoi. What did Moshe do during the 7 days of the establishment? They're called the Shivas Yemei Miluim. It's the days of the Hakamas HaMishkan. What did he do during that time? So where do you know that from? The Midrash. So this is the Midrash. It's a Midrash Tanchuma. Okay, this is the Midrash. We're going to learn the Midrash inside. Okay. Kol Shivas Yemei HaMiluim haya Moshe mefarkoi. What would mefarek means to take it apart. Okay, and he would then re-establish it twice every day. You imagine how disheartening that is, right? You start it, and you break it down, and you put it back up, and you break it down. It's like hectic. So he would leave it overnight. It's a big job. Yeah. So part of the thing is the Midrash also says that that Betzalel and Eliyav, they couldn't really do it themselves. They didn't fit together. It's like when your kids come and they're doing Lego and they can't put that last Lego pieces in to take the one out. So that's what Moshe did. But he did that, and then he was mafarik it, and he redid it. It's intense, very intense. So how do we know that? Shneimar, because it says, close from the Pasuk, Takim Hukam. The first two Pasukim. It says Takim, you will do it, and Hukam became established. So therefore we see, it says the Midrash in the name of Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, that it was done twice a day. And Rabbi Chanina says, Shalosh Pamim, 3 times. It wasn't just twice, but it was 3 times. How do we know that? Shneimar, Takim, Hukam, Vayakem. Because there's a third pasuk, and that's the pasuk that throws everything off. Okay? So now you've got this machlokas amongst these great sages. How many times Moshe Rabbeinu established or dismantled, and will remantle, I'm not sure what the word is the Mishkan. So the obvious question is, who cares? Why do you have to make a machlokas about twice or 3 times? So you'll say to me on a very simple level, because the psukim denotes certain things. And it's all in the psukim. Everything's in the psukim. Right? But if everything's in the psukim that it denotes certain things, how come the one says 2 and the other one says 3, which means that the one who says 2, we understand there has to be established and dismantled. That's Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. But for some reason, Rabbi Chanina says that only twice is not enough. There also has to be a 3rd time. So I'm going to throw this question out to you. Why is it so important that the Mishkan is created, disassembled, recreated, disassembled, recreated, constantly over a 7-day period? I'm throwing it out to you. Like what is like Moshe, like we're bored.
Wasn't he in the whole 12
So the avodah I can understand, but why does he have to just keep ripping apart the Mishkan?
Every time it come out the exact same.
Exactly the same. No difference. It's identical. It's in an identical place. So there's no chiddush. That's a good question. Excellent question, actually. There's no chiddush in the form of the Mishkan. And every single time they took it down and then they moved somewhere else was exactly the same. That's why you can't do ksiva on Shabbos, right? Because they wrote on the crushing, which carries you with, because the minute you change it, it could change, it could get a little bit different. So, why is it so important?
I could understand once I could fabricate it for it, but
Okay, fabricate, good, try.
Like that, sometimes when you build something, you think it's you building it. So then you have to take it out and put the work in again and take it down, put the work in again. It's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like that's a lot of how the world really works, according to Hashem. It's like we think we're building.
Okay.
But we are really just putting pieces together.
But then why do we have to take them apart and put them together again?
I'm not sure. So that's why I said maybe once I could understand, and then you could say, okay, you thought it was you building it, but really, it's kiyum, its real existence is Hashem's, but I don't know why.
Okay.
So many times.
I don't know if it had anything to do with Hashem being the one that sees the couple.
Okay.
He was involved in the building, he wasn't involved, he wasn't.
Oh, okay.
And
So there is this idea that Moshe was a bit upset, right? It's like he's the one who gets everything, and the only thing he doesn't get is to build the house of Hashem. So yes, he isn't given that to a certain degree of God, but that's the first time they can't do it. So put it up, Shalom Al Yisrael, and you're done. Okay. So there's something that we have to understand, and what we have to understand is that in everything that is physical, right? There are sparks of Kedusha and there are sparks of Tumah. Everything, no matter what it is. There's a Shemi Shmuel that says the most astounding thing. Like it's mamish astounding. He says the following. He says when Avraham Avinu goes down into Mitzrayim for the first time, right? What happened? What does he come out with?
Wealth.
Unbelievable wealth. Avraham Avinu goes down to Mitzrayim. He comes back because of the whole mix up with Sarah, right? The king gives him all the money in the world, and he comes with unbelievable, enormous wealth. Enormous wealth. Then he has a war against the king of Sodom, or against the other king, right? He saves the Sodom and he saves Lavan, and he comes to the king of Sodom who greets him, and he says to him, "You can have anything you want." And Abraham says, "What? No, I don't want it to be told that Sodom is the one that makes me rich." So okay, it was good enough for Mitzrayim, but you can't have Sodom, right? That's number one. Number two question is that says the Shem Yishmael, you got to now go back and look a little bit further in history, because we know what happens. Am Yisrael are told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, that they need to ask the Mitzrim for all their wealth. Why do they need to ask the Mitzrim for their wealth? Because obviously it's going to come back to us, which it does. Many years later, there's Gemara's about what happened. Am Yisrael kind of stole, and the whole court case. I'm going to go into that now. Why is it so important for us, for Avraham Avinu to get the wealth from Mitzrayim when he goes down, and then for Bnei Israel to get more wealth? Why is that so important? So says the Shem Yishmael, it's a beautiful idea. He says the following. He says that we know that Mitzrayim is this place that is so filled with tumah, to the extent that Bnei Israel, when they go down, they reach this, we all know, this 49th level of tumah, right? And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu hadn't pulled them out, then we don't know where we would have been. You all know that, right? That's a good vault, right? That's, we've got 49 days of the Omer to fly up. But understand that Avraham Avinu understood this. And he understood that where the power of that tumah comes from. So I'm going to throw out to you. Where does the power of the tumah come from? Keep going. I'm going to show you the Shamish like out of this world. Where does the power of the tumah come from?
That existed
In Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim is this place that is just pure tumah. But pure tumah has power. Where does the power come from?
Serving the physicality.
So we love that. We love saying, and we do, because that's what we're taught all the time, right? That tumah is the complete opposite of ruchnius, and it comes from serving physicality, etc. You know what the Shem Shmuel says? You know where the power of the tumah comes from? The power of the tumah comes from the nitzutzei kedusha that are sitting in Mitzrayim. There are sparks of kedusha in the whole world. Everywhere has them. And we understand that there's this concept of zeh leumat zeh. This exists opposite to that. Wherever there is powerful kedusha, you have exactly balanced tumah. You got it? So the more powerful the kedusha, the more powerful the tumah. The more powerful the kedusha, the more powerful the challenge. You decide you're going to take on a new mitzvah, right? You're very frum, right? You're going to take on the new mitzvah, whatever that new mitzvah is. I'm going to give like a bizarre example. Let's say you're going to take on, you don't normally do negel vasa in the morning. I'm going to use that as a stupid example, okay? You never do negel vasa in the morning. You say, I want to now start doing negel vasa. I can promise you now that next morning, the minute you wake up, you will have itchy eyes or an itchy ear or an itchy nose, or something will come up that you're tempted not to wash your hands before you touch. Why? Because that's the nature of the Yetzer Hara, which is the tumah in the world. But the minute you bring in Kedusha, the Yetzer Hara becomes more powerful. That's why it says, the greater a person, the greater is the Yetzer Hara, right? That's what it says. Because of the power of the Kedusha, not because of the power of the Tumah. The power of the Tumah is a result, says the Shem Yishmuel, of the power of the Kedusha. So our Avraham Avinu goes down to Mitzrayim in order to do one thing and one thing only. To extract the Kedusha, the Nitzutzei Kedusha, that he can, in order that the Tumah of Mitzrayim is not powerful enough to overcome the Jewish people. He can do it, but they can't do it on their own. Got it? Now, once you understand that, now we can start looking at what's going on with these things. So all this physical stuff that was used to build the Mishkan, okay, is taken from where? It's all taken from Egyptian wealth. Every single thing that they had. You know, there wasn't like fancy Jews in those times, right? Everything was taken from the Mitzu. What was it that was taken? It was the Nitzutzei Kedusha. But if you take Nitzutzei Kedusha, then what does it have with it? Nitzutzei Tumah must be there as well. So therefore, as they bring it and they dedicate it to the creation of the Mishkan, so therefore what happens, it becomes stronger. The Kedusha becomes stronger and becomes stronger and becomes stronger. And every time you recreate that purpose, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. But now, it's a space where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to rest. So if it's a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to rest, a kind of tumah. So you've got to keep establishing it. We have a story, an unbelievable story, in the Torah of our father Yaakov. Our father Yaakov crosses over, coming back with all his children, with the exception of Binyamin. Right, because Binyamin is still in the womb of his mother. And he comes back over and he comes back into Eretz Yisrael. And who does he meet? After the angel. He defeats the angel. And then he meets Esav with all his men. And Esav wants to destroy him because Esav is very upset. You can give him that one. He can be upset. He's very upset about what happened with Yaakov. So Esav is upset. And what does Yaakov do? To appease his brother. How many times? Bows down 7 times. The Gemara tells us a story about things Rabbi Chia, who also bows down 7 times in the face of tumah. And in doing that, he undoes the tumah. There's something about the number 7 when used for kedusha that it undoes the tumah. That's what's going on here. Got it? Okay. The Kedusha Salevi, that's Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditcher, says that these Nitzutzei Kedusha of Hashem's presence are part of our very essence of the human personality and human persona. And the more we engage with them, the more we're able to rehabilitate them within ourselves, not only in the world of love. Okay. The Nesivos Shalom, that's the Slonim Rebbe, says the following. He says, the multiple cycles of building and tearing down hint at a crucial realization. And I think, David, this is what you were saying. Man must fall. Man must fail. And he will fail, or she will fail, many, many times. And each time there's a failure, without exception, there's a challenge. And the challenge is, do you lose faith or not? Do you lose motivation to move on to the next step? We all go through this, some in bigger things, some in smaller things. You know, like it can be anything. So what we have to do, what the Torah is telling us from Moshe Rabbeinu, undoing the Mishkan, is that we have to pick ourselves up immediately and try again. We can create the most unbelievable Mishkan in our own lives, in our own selves. Okay? But we know, Rabbis, Machshavos, B'lev Ish, V'atzas Hashem, Yisakum, right? We've got great ideas. At the end of that, talk to Kodesh Baruch Hu. And Chalila V'chas, I'm not wishing this on anybody, but our Kodesh Baruch Hu challenges us. It can be the biggest and smallest things. Sorry.
I think it's Mishnah, Sheva Yipol.
Exactly. Sheva Yipol. Isn't that interesting, huh? Everything's 7. Everything's 7. Okay? So our challenge is, what do we do with this falling? Do we fall, as the Slonim says, into depression or melancholy? Or do we start rebuilding the Mishkan? Moshe does it twice a day for 7 days. It's an unbelievable lesson for us that in actual fact, part of our Avodas Hashem is not just saying Gamzu Latova. He doesn't say that. I'm saying that. I say it tongue in cheek because I think a lot of people say Gamzu Latova, they don't really mean it. You know, it's all good. It's not all good. If you all say it's all good, right? There and then at that point, then you've missed the point of Gamzu Latova. It will be good. We can understand it to be good. But there and then it's not good. And if you miss the challenge, then you aren't able to take up the emunah lesson out of that. I think. So he says we must be prepared to inspect the quality of what we build. Reevaluate all the details of its construction. Look for the small flaws that we may have been unaware of in the original construction. There's no end to upgrading the work we can do to make our personal sanctuary even more effective. So every time, unlike Moshe Rabbeinu, there are no flaws in his establishment of the Mishkan. But in our Mishkanot, right, there are always going to be flaws. And sometimes with such a flaw, you have to actually undo the whole thing and rebuild it. But if you do, you do. Okay, what's that got to do with the Megillah? Sure, a pleasure.
If you said that every time he built it, there was like nothing wrong with it, he wasn't really perfecting it to make the sanctuary like a perfect sanctuary, because on day one,
Well, he was. There was an imperfection. That's why I said the form is exactly the same.
Yeah.
There's an imperfection. The imperfection is the nitzitz of tumah that's sitting on it that needs to be undone. See, but it's tiny. You can't feel it. It looks right. You know, we're busy renovating our house up the road. And so please God, it'll all be okay and the foundations are right. But I always think, please God, if there's the smallest imperfection somewhere along the line, it's going to come out. It's the same thing in our lives. They're like, you don't realize small imperfections are the things that are the real damage. A crack in the wall is horrible. Doesn't look nice, right? Something to think about. Okay, what does that have to do with the Megillah? Okay. What does it have to do with the Megillah? So I'm going to show you in the Megillah 2 stories. The one is in the Megillah itself, and the other one is in the Gemara relating to the Megillah. I don't have to tell you the story because you all know the story. You all know the story very, very well. But sometimes we miss certain lessons that we should have from these stories in order for us to understand them on a deeper level. So let's have a look. If you go to page 1259. I think that's right. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Apologies. Go to page 1257. So this, where we are, if you look at that second paragraph, says that day. Okay? So where we are in the Megillah is Achashverosh has, after Esther and all of them have fasted for 3 days, and Esther finds favor in the eyes of Achashverosh. Everything's fantastic, and he said you can have whatever you want up to Chatzia Malchut. So the Mefarshim say, what's Chatzia Malchus? So what does that mean? Up ad Chatzia Malchus. So many of the Mefarshim explain up to Yerushalayim. You can have anything you want, but you can't have Yerushalayim. It's half the Malchus. If you go from Hodu ad Kush, Hodu is India, Kush is what now we would call it, what's it called? Ethiopia. Can't remember the airline. Right, Kush is Ethiopia, and the middle point there is Eretz Yisrael. You can have whatever you want. Mihodu ad Kush, halfway, but you can't have that halfway point. Okay, that's according to some. Okay, that's just midrashim. But let's go. So what happens? She wants to have a party. She wants to have this lekker private little function. And who's invited to that private function? Achashverosh, the king, and Haman. Now, can you imagine this guy Haman? We look. Gemara tells us about his past. Haman was a schlepper. He was a barber. He was really a nothing. He was a stable. He was the lowest of the low, and somehow, right? How? Because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted. Somehow he becomes this incredible person. And the Malbim says that the reason he becomes, listen to this, it's a complete twist. The reason he becomes the second in command to the king is because the king falls in love with Esther. Okay? And the king wants to give, that's Achashverosh, wants to give Esther something that she will value. But he doesn't know what to give her because she doesn't say anything. Says, I'll give her something that she'll really value. How did she become the queen? Because of advice of someone. Whose advice? Memuchan. Who's Memuchan? Zuhaman, says the Gemara. So therefore, says the king, because Memuchan, who is Haman, is the guy that gave him the advice to do all the things and get all these young girls and make into find this queen. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make Haman my second in command because of her. So she will feel unbelievable because this is the guy that brought me to this position. Okay? That's how krum this whole story is. That's from the Malbim. That's not my story. That's the Malbim. It's quite valid. It's quite amazing. Anyway, Haman now is so happy, and that's what it says. I'll read it in English. That Haman went out joyful and exuberant, right? Samach v'toiv leiv. And then what happens? V'chirot Haman et Mordechai. He sees Mordechai at the king's gate, and he doesn't stand up. He doesn't move, right? What happens to Haman? He becomes inferior. He's absolutely, unbelievably angry. Vayit apek Haman, but Haman holds himself. And he brings everybody together and he tells them exactly what happened about his Mount Wealth and what's going on and how fantastic the king is and that he's going to be all invited to this incredible mishter that the queen has organized. Everything, I've got everything. I've got every single thing that I could possibly want. But there's a little bit of a problem. What's the problem? Not a money problem. It's not a housing problem. It's not a family problem. He doesn't have children that need like real serious issues. He's got nothing. There's nothing really wrong with what Haman has in his life at this point in time. And he's got money to buy whatever he needs. any help, any assistance, any medical needs. He's got every single thing that he could possibly want. He had the top level of Discovery membership, okay? With medical savings that could go forever. He had zero worries, except for one thing. What's the one thing? He's covered. Something's bothering him. Anyone? Does that like maybe resonate a little bit with us? But everything we need, and there's one little thing that's not really a big thing that makes us bothered about so many things. And that does for me. When I was thinking about this and I realized this, gee whiz, small things or big things, or small things that we make into big things that make us into the people. And he says it's worth a neno shaveli. It's worth absolutely nothing. But Baruch Hashem, he had this beautiful, lovely wife named Zeresh. So Zeresh, if you look in Hasidic writings, she's referred to as Sheket. You know Sheket is? Sheket is a you know the word shiksa? You know what I call people shiksa? Right, a shiksa is a lizard. It's a lizard. It's a lizard. It's a like a rodent. Okay. Anyway, so she's called that. She says to him, let's get rid of him. And what does that do? If he's going to get rid of his little problem, then he's happy. And that's why it says that he goes into the house, Sameach, and he's so happy. He's now got a repurposed purpose. Phenomenal. Okay? So what happened to Haman? Haman experiences this downfall, which is not really a downfall. He sees a little flaw, and what happens to him is he falls apart. He falls apart that he can't even pick himself up. And if he doesn't have his wife to pick himself up, he's done. He's gone. We don't know what would have happened. Could he have gone to the house of the king or not? Okay? What happens to Mordechai on the other hand? So Mordechai hears about what happened. Okay? Mordechai hears about this decree. And the Torah and the Megillah tells us that he wore sakva efer. He put on the sackcloth. We can understand the Jewish people are about to be destroyed. What do you do when the Jewish people are about to be destroyed? You got to daven, right? He cries out this incredible cry. He davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Midrash describes what happens with that cry, and we won't go into that, but ultimately that cry is part of what broke through the gates of heaven. And the Gemara says, where did he go? What was he doing while this whole story is unfolding? Where did Haman find him? So look at the Psukim say, after the king had said all these things, and the sleeper says to him that, so the pasuk says, go and get Haman. So Haman took the robe and the horse and attired Mordechai and led him through the city, proclaiming before him. This is what the king does. We have no clue where Mordechai was. The Gemara tells us where Mordechai was. You know where Mordechai was? Mordechai was sitting in the base medrash, teaching children the laws of the Korban Mincha. Okay? He's sitting, teaching them laws of the Korban Mincha. So the Mefarshim explain, that's an interesting approach. Like, what are you doing? Why aren't you davening him? Well, you're about to be destroyed. What are the laws of the Korban Mincha got to do with anything? You need to go back. 70 years since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. If you remember that there was a period in time just before Achashverosh becomes the king, right? That there was Koresh who said that they could go rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. And they went, and then, according to the Gemara, seems to imply at certain that it was the sons of Haman who stopped them. Okay? Now, Achashverosh is in place now, and there's no happening of the Beis Hamikdash. You want to let Esther go to the Makom Hamikdash, right? So, where's the hope? Where's the emunah? Where's the bitachon? Mordechai is the bitachon. The Jewish people are about to be destroyed according to what the decree is. And what does Mordechai do? Mordechai says, no, it's not. Well, the way we behave is we don't become downtrodden and we lose our sense of purpose, but rather we sit and we teach our children that this is what's going to happen when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. Because we, as the Solomon Rebbe says, when things go bad, what do? We pick ourselves up. We don't let them fall down. Natalie's got a friend, Rochi Levitansky, who is the Rebbetzin at Chabad of Sumy in the Ukraine. So they are now living in a basement because they're there. But what do? Jews are mad, right? So instead of leaving, which, you can't do that. I mean, what Jew would leave a place where there's a war when there are other Jews that might need something? So they're going out, they're reaching out, they're making sure people have got what they need, because that's what we do. We have to live our lives the Mordechai way. We have to live our lives the Moshe way. We have to live our lives in the way that even when we fall, even when there is destruction, inverted commas, we have to pick ourselves up and try again. Because when we do that, we build the real Beis HaMikdash. Now we keep speaking about, we will all bring the Beis HaMikdash and we are the building blocks and all those things, and we are. But we are that if we live our lives according to the lessons that we learned. Pekudei from Moshe, and one of the lessons, at least a small one, that we learned from Mordechai in the Megillah. Thank you, ladies. Hope you enjoyed that. Yizrat Hashem. We'll learn again together. God bless.